My name is Jack Peterson. I'm pushing 60, and about 3 weeks ago, my whole world changed with a few blinking numbers on a lottery ticket. It was worth $60 million. I just sat right here at this kitchen table, the ticket shaking in my hands, my heart hammering in my chest. Even with the shock, one decision was crystal clear. My family would never know. Not my son, not my daughter, and certainly not my brother who's been bleeding me dry for decades. You see, with my family, money ain't about love, it's a weapon. I was about to find out just how little I actually meant to them. And here's the part that's hard to swallow. Before I spent a single dime of that cash, I decided to test them. I wanted to see who'd stand by me if they thought I was flat broke. Who'd disappear? Who would finally show their true colors? The answer just about crushed me, and it changed everything. Remember to follow this story. The first night after those numbers lit up the screen, sleep was impossible. I just stared at that ticket under the dim light, listening to the fridge hum and the old clock tick on the wall. 60 million, maybe 40 after taxes. It was still more money than I could ever have dreamed of. For a second, the boy in me, the one who grew up on a chili farm in rural Indiana, wanted to scream, to run outside and tell the whole world I was finally free. But the man I've become, the one hardened by years of family letdowns, knew better. I poured a glass of bourbon, even though my doctor had warned me about my blood pressure. The whiskey gleamed as I swirled it, and I thought about every time I'd been a fool. Mike, my son, had called me 5 years ago in the middle of the night. "Dad, it's only 2,000, just until my business takes off." I wired the money before sunrise. He never mentioned it again. My daughter, Sarah, was more subtle. She wanted me with her when she bought her first apartment, but suddenly needed help with the closing costs. She promised it was temporary. 8 years later, she hardly ever answers my calls. And Dave, my younger brother, if there was a world record for borrowed money and broken promises, he'd be the champ. He always had that whining tone, a way of making me feel guilty for having even a little more than him, even when all I had was a steady job and a small retirement fund. I let the bourbon burn its way down my throat. I knew exactly what would happen if I told them about the money. They'd circle like a pack of wolves, each with their own story, their own needs, their own emergencies. In the end, it wouldn't be a gift. It would be a chain around my neck. The glass hit the table with a quiet thud. Right there, I made up my mind. Silence was my only protection. The next morning, the sun snuck through the blinds, making stripes on the worn wood floor. I brewed my coffee black and strong, just how I like it. As the smell filled the kitchen, I opened my laptop and typed, "How to claim lottery winnings anonymously." My fingers froze over the keyboard, but I kept going. That's when I found articles about blind trusts. An attorney could set one up, hide my identity. I could get the money, and nobody would ever know that Jack Peterson had become a multimillionaire overnight. A half-smile crept onto my face. That anonymity was worth more than the ticket itself. But even with that safety plan forming, another thought pushed its way in. Over the years, I'd been the one to quietly carry my family through their storms. And yet, when I needed just a fraction of that support in return, when my wife, Susan, was sick and I was buried in hospital bills, who was there? Not Mike, not Sarah, not Dave. They all had their excuses. Busy lives, urgent needs. It was my father's sister, Aunt Betty, long since retired and living on a tiny pension, who slipped me a check for $200 and whispered, "I wish it were more, Jack." That memory stung. It was on my mind as I sat there, scrolling through names of lawyers downtown. I picked up the phone and called a number I found on a firm's website. A woman's voice answered crisply. "Collins and Associates. How may I help you?" "Yeah," I said, my voice quieter than normal. "I need to set up a meeting with a Ms. Laura Collins. It's about a financial matter." There was a pause. "We have an opening tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Will that work?" "That'll do just fine," I said, scribbling the address on a notepad. When I hung up, the silence in the house felt heavy again. My place is nothing special. A one-story house with creaky floors and paint peeling off the outside. But it suited me. After Susan passed, I just couldn't bring myself to move. This was where we had spent our last days together, where her laugh used to echo in the kitchen. The thought of this place being filled with relatives begging for cash made me feel sick. That evening, I sat on the porch as the streetlights came on. My neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, waved as he walked his dog. I raised a hand back, thinking how happy he was to be clueless about the little piece of paper in my pocket that could buy every house on this street. I was actually jealous of his ignorance. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Dave. "Hey buddy, got a minute? I'm in a little trouble." I didn't answer. Not yet. I just stared at those words, my jaw clenching. This was exactly why I couldn't tell them. The ink wasn't even dry on my miracle, and already the old habits were reaching for me. I put my phone in my pocket, went inside, and sat down. The next morning, I put on my best jacket, a navy blue one with buttons that were a little loose, and took the elevator up to the 15th floor of a glass building downtown. The lobby smelled of shiny marble and expensive money. Laura Collins greeted me with a firm handshake. She was around my age, with her silver hair tied back and sharp eyes behind her glasses. "Mr. Peterson," she said kindly, "let's step into my office." I followed her in, clutching the envelope in my pocket like a lifeline. Once the door was closed, I laid the ticket on her desk. For a moment, her eyebrows shot up, but she got her composure back quickly, like she was putting on a professional mask. "I understand," she said softly. "Well, you've come to the right place. We can protect your identity, Mr. Peterson, but first we need to talk about what you want to do. What do you want this money to do for you?" Her question just hung there in the air. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What did I want? Security, sure. Freedom, absolutely. But more than that, I wanted the truth. I wanted to know, once and for all, if my family cared about me or what I could provide. "I want to keep this quiet," I said finally. "And I want to make sure that if I decide to help anyone, it's on my terms." Laura nodded. "Then we'll start with a blind trust. It'll take a few weeks, but once it's set up, the money will be untouchable by anyone but you." I let out a long breath, relief mixed with dread. On the bus ride home, I watched the city blur past the window. I thought about the years behind me, about every holiday where I was a wallet instead of a person, every phone call that started with small talk but ended with a request. And I thought about what Laura had asked me. "What do you want this money to do?" That night, the idea hit me. Slow at first, then with total clarity. I wasn't going to tell them about winning. Instead, I'd test them. I'd tell each one the same story. That I'd lost a bunch of money, that I was about to lose my house, and that I needed help. Just a small amount compared to what I'd given them over the years. I wanted to see, when the tables turned, who would show up and who would walk away. I sat at this table, a pen scratching against paper, writing down names. Mike, Sarah, Dave, my sister-in-law Susan. Everyone who had ever taken, borrowed, or demanded. I even wrote down Betty's name, even though my gut told me she would help if she could. As I wrote, my chest got tight. Was this a cruel thing to do? Maybe. But after a lifetime of being the one who carried everyone else, I had to know. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The house was quiet when I finished. I folded the paper, put it in my pocket, and blew out the candle on the table. The flame flickered once before turning into smoke. Tomorrow I'd make the first call. And so began the test that would unravel everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. I lay awake long after midnight, the notepad with my family's names tucked neatly in my pocket. The house was just as it had been since Susan passed. I used to think silence was the worst thing for a man, but after years of being drained by the very people who called themselves my family, I had learned to see silence as a friend. It didn't take from me. It didn't lie. It didn't pretend to love me just because it needed something. My mind kept going back to the past, replaying memories I had tried to forget. The first time I realized that money would always matter more than me in this family was when I was 19. I had just gotten accepted into the university. I remember walking into the kitchen, the letter in my hand, my heart pounding with pride. My mother just smiled a little, but my father shook his head. "We can't afford it, Jack." Not unless you take out loans. Dave was sitting at the table, 6 years younger than me, eating his cereal. He didn't even look up. That night, while my parents argued about the cost, my mother whispered, "Maybe Dave will make things easier for us one day. He's got that charm." Charm, she called it. I had to work my butt off. But somehow, charm always seemed more valuable in their eyes. I worked 2 part-time jobs to pay my way through school. I never asked for their help again. But whenever Dave wanted something, summer camp, books, his first car, they always found a way. Sometimes it was my savings they borrowed. Sometimes it was a check with my name on it. I told myself it was fine. He was younger. He'd grow out of it. But Dave never grew out of anything. He grew into a man who thought the world owed him something. And somehow that debt always seemed to fall on me. Life with Susan was different. She kept me grounded. She was steady, quiet. A teacher who believed that small acts of kindness were worth more than any dollar. We lived a simple life. A small house with wallpaper peeling at the edges. But it was full of laughter. We raised our kids, Mike and Sarah, in that house. Those years, before things started to fall apart, were the only time I ever felt secure in my family. We didn't have a lot, but what we had felt like enough. Then sickness came, and it was like the ground was pulled out from under our feet. Susan's diagnosis, stomach cancer, shattered everything. She had never been a drinker or smoker in her life. I worked myself to the bone trying to keep her comfortable. I sold my truck, drained our retirement, and took shifts I was too old to handle. When the bills became mountains I couldn't climb, I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I called my kids and I called Dave. Mike answered first. His voice was short, rushed. "Dad, I can't keep giving money away. My new company is just starting up. 2 grand here, 5 grand there. It all adds up." The words cut deeper than he knew. Sarah's tone was softer, but no less final. "Dad, Kevin and I are paying off the condo. Maybe in a few months we could." The sentence just hung there, empty. And Dave? Well, Dave sighed into the phone like I had ruined his night. "I got my own problems, Jack. Maybe you should take out a second mortgage on the house. That's what people do." I remember sitting at the kitchen table that night, Susan asleep in the other room, my head in my hands. Not one of them could be bothered to stand by me when I was drowning. Only Aunt Betty, my father's sister, who had retired and lived on a pension that barely covered groceries, showed up. She pressed a check for $200 into my hand with trembling fingers. "I wish it were more," she whispered. I told her it was enough, but the shame of needing her and the gratitude I felt stayed with me. When Susan passed 6 months later, Mike and Sarah came to the funeral in stiff black suits, checking their phones between condolences. Dave stood at the front giving a big speech about how family was everything, then left early to catch a flight to Miami. The emptiness of it all stayed with me more than his words. "Dad, you'll be all right?" Mike said, patting my shoulder with one hand, his car keys already in the other. "Call me if you need anything." Sarah said the same, her voice light, as if she knew I never would. Dave hugged me, smelling of cologne and cheap whiskey, and muttered, "Stay strong, brother. Stay strong," as if strength alone was supposed to replace love. I tried to shake those memories as I sat staring at the candle flame on my kitchen table years later. But they always came back, especially now that I had something none of them knew about, something that would expose them for who they really were. That lottery ticket had done more than just make me rich. It had given me the chance to strip away all the excuses, all the fake smiles. I would make up a story. I'd tell them I was broke, that I had lost money in bad investments, that I was on the edge of losing the house. I'd ask for $5,000. Not a fortune, not impossible, just enough to matter, enough for the test. For Mike, with his new luxury SUV, it was pocket change. For Sarah and her lawyer husband, it was less than a weekend getaway. For Dave, it was less than what he already owed me. I wondered which of them would help and which would disappear. The question twisted inside me, a mix of anticipation and fear. Did I really want the truth? Was I ready to face it? What if they let me down again? What if the answer confirmed what I had always feared, that in my family, Love was just another word for a transaction. The thought ate at me as I lay in bed until sleep finally took over. The next day, I walked into town. The air was crisp with autumn, the sidewalks covered with dry leaves. I passed the diner Susan used to love. We'd sit there on Sunday mornings, sharing coffee, sometimes with Betty joining us, hunched over her crossword puzzle. Now the booth was empty, the window fogged up from the breath of strangers. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. My thumb was over Mike's number. I wasn't ready. Instead, I scrolled to Frank's number. Frank had been my neighbor 3 decades ago before he retired from the fire department. A man built like a brick wall with eyes that saw everything. Over the years, we'd stayed in touch, grabbing a beer every once in a while. 2 old men swapping stories from different kinds of battles. He answered on the second ring. "Jack, long time, man. What's on your mind? Can you meet me?" I asked. "I need some advice." We met at the community hall. The walls were covered with old flags, photos of young men who had given everything. Frank slid into the booth across from me, his hands folded, his look steady. I told him everything about the ticket, the money, the secret I was keeping, and finally the test. He didn't interrupt. His jaw worked like he was chewing on the weight of it all. When I finished, he leaned back and let out a long breath. "Jack, if you test them, be ready for the answer. Once you see who they are, you can't unsee it." "I have to know," I said. My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. He nodded. "Then do it. But protect yourself. Write it down. Record it. Not for them, for you. So when they try to change the story later, you'll remember exactly how it went." I swallowed hard. He was right. My family had always been masters at rewriting history. I'd need proof, not for a lawsuit, not to shame them, but to hold on to when doubt crept back in. That night, I came home and sat at the kitchen table again. The same table where I had mourned Susan, where I had eaten countless silent meals, where I had stared at the ticket that changed everything. I took out a worn leather notebook, the one Susan had given me years ago, and wrote on the first page in strong letters, "The test." Underneath it, I listed their names. Mike, Sarah, Dave, even Susan, my sister-in-law, and finally, Betty. My pen pressed so hard the ink bled through the paper. For each one, I left space to write down their answers. When I finished, I closed the notebook and put my hand on it. The candle flame flickered once, twice, then became steady. In the quiet, I whispered to the room, "Let's see who's really there for me." The clock ticked past midnight. Tomorrow the calls would begin. The morning after, I wrote their names down in the leather notebook. I was awake before the sun. The house was quiet, but my mind was already racing, practicing the words I would need to say. For years, my family had seen me as the rock, the reliable one, the man who carried the weight without a complaint. Now, for the first time, I would ask them to imagine me falling apart. Just saying it felt strange. I made a pot of coffee, black as tar, and sat at the table with a pad of paper, writing out the words I thought would sound real. "The company I put some money into went under," I mumbled, testing the phrase in the quiet. "The bank is getting impatient. I need 5,000 just to keep the house." The words felt heavy, but they sounded real. After all, it wasn't too far from the truth. I had almost lost this house once before when Susan was sick. Maybe that's why I knew how to sound desperate without trying too hard. I imagined their reactions as I wrote. Mike would sigh, find a way to blame me, maybe give me a lecture about money management as if I hadn't spent a lifetime teaching him what responsibility meant. Sarah would sound sympathetic, but her excuses would be wrapped in a soft voice, like a knife wrapped in silk. Dave would probably laugh, pretend he wished he could help, then tell some story about how he was so close to a deal that would change everything. And Susan, my sister-in-law, she would cluck her tongue, whisper to others about how Jack had finally lost it, and enjoy the gossip more than she'd ever enjoy helping me. The candle I had left on the table had burned down to a nub. I rubbed my eyes, then grabbed my phone. My finger hovered over Mike's name first, but something inside me stopped me. He was my son, yeah, but I didn't want to start with him. I needed to be sharper before I faced him, more ready. Instead, I scrolled to Sarah's name. My daughter had always been the softer one, the one who still called on holidays, even if it was just out of a sense of duty. If anyone was going to give me a little bit of hope, it would be her. I pushed the button, held the phone to my ear, and listened to the rings. 1, 2, 3. Then her voice came on, bright and fake. "Dad, this is a surprise. Everything okay?" I took a deep breath and let it out slow, lowering my tone, letting the tiredness come through. "Not really, Sarah. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important." There was a pause. "What's wrong?" I let the silence hang for a second before I spoke, letting her imagine the worst. "The firm I put some money into went under. Fraud, bad management, whatever it was, the money's gone. And the bank is already calling about the mortgage. I need some help. Just enough to keep me from going under until I figure things out. About 5,000. Her sharp intake of breath reached me even through the phone line. For a second, I thought she might surprise me. Then her voice got soft, careful, practiced. "Oh, Dad, that's terrible. I can't believe they did that to you, but, 5,000 is a lot. Kevin just paid the kids' school tuition and we're still trying to catch up on the apartment renovations. Maybe in a couple of months." I cut in gently. "Sarah, the bank won't wait a couple of months. They'll start paperwork in a few weeks." Her silence went on for too long. I could practically hear her weighing the cost of my crisis against the comfort of her life. "I'll talk to Kevin," she said finally. "Maybe we can manage a smaller amount, but I can't promise." A smaller amount, a half measure, a delay. I could hear in her voice that the conversation was over. "I understand," I said, my tone flat. "Thanks for listening." "Of course, Dad," she replied quickly, a little too eager to hang up. "We'll figure something out. Don't worry." But she wasn't going to figure anything out. Not for me. I ended the call, set the phone down, and stared at the leather notebook. I wrote her name, drew a line, and wrote the words, sympathy, excuses, no commitment. The taste in my mouth was bitter. For a long time I just sat there, my coffee now cold. A part of me wanted to stop the experiment right there, to hold on to the last little bit of hope I still had. But hope is a kind of lie. Once you face the truth, you can't go back. By noon, I had practiced again, changed the story a little and made it sharper. This time I called Dave. My brother answered on the second ring, his voice full of bravado. "Jack, long time, brother. How's the quiet life?" "Not so quiet," I replied. "I've run into some trouble." "Trouble?" He laughed. "Don't we all?" I didn't laugh back. "The truth is, I made some bad investments. Lost a big chunk of money. The bank is circling the house. I need 5,000 to cover things until I can sort it out." He didn't miss a beat. 5? Hell, I don't even have 500 lying around. Times are tough, you know. Market's rough. Clients are late with payments. Maybe you should, sell that old truck or take out a new loan. You've always been good at figuring things out." "Dave," I said calmly, "I helped you with more than that when you needed it. When you went in on that failed restaurant. When you begged me for money after your divorce. I came through every time." The line was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "Yeah, well, that was different. Family helps family, right? You'll figure this out. You always do." "Family helps family," I repeated softly, tasting the irony. He changed the subject, then asked if I'd seen the football game, as if we hadn't just trampled all over decades of history. I ended the call shortly after, wrote his name in the notebook and noted, "No money, deflection, empty promises." By late afternoon, the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had soaked up the weight of the answers I was collecting. I walked outside to clear my head, crunching leaves beneath my boots. But every sound seemed to echo with their refusals. I thought of Susan, wondered what she would say if she were here. She'd probably tell me not to torture myself, not to measure love in dollars. But even she would admit this was never about money. It was about whether love existed at all. As dusk settled, I lit another candle and returned to the notebook. 2 names, 2 failures. Sarah with her excuses. Dave with his deflections. I poured myself a bourbon, the ice clinking sharply, and prepared for the next call. Mike's name stared back at me like a challenge. When I finally dialed, it was already dark outside. The only light in the house was the flickering flame and the glow of the phone screen. Mike answered on the fourth ring, his voice impatient. "Dad, everything okay? I'm in the middle of something." I drew in a steady breath. "Not really. I wouldn't be calling if it weren't serious. I made some investments and they collapsed. I'm short on the mortgage. I need $5,000 to hold the bank off." There was a pause, then a sharp laugh without any humor. "Dad, you should have known better. At your age, gambling with investments. Come on, I can't just hand over $5,000. I've got payroll to cover, a new office lease, and a product launch. You should have planned." The words landed like stones. I kept my voice even. "Mike, I planned my whole life. I gave you money for your business when no one else believed in it. I sacrificed for you. I'm asking you for the first time." His tone hardened. "And I appreciate that, but I can't. You'll figure it out. You always do." The echo of Dave's excuse. I closed my eyes, swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "I see," I said simply. "Look, Dad, I'll call you later. Got to run." He hung up before I could answer. I stared at the dead phone line, the weight of the silence pressing in again. Slowly, I wrote his name in the notebook. Dismissive lectures. Refusal. The bourbon glass felt heavy in my hand. 3 calls, 3 answers, 3 proofs of what I had long suspected but never wanted to face. The candle's flame bent as if to the weight of my grief. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to the empty room. So this is what family means. The clock ticked toward midnight, and outside the world carried on as if nothing had changed. But in my house everything had. The experiment had begun, and already it was revealing more than I was ready to bear. And yet, I knew deep in my bones I couldn't stop now. Tomorrow there were more names to call, and by the time I reached the end of the list, I would know exactly who they were and who I was without them. Morning light slipped through the blinds, a pale gray that made the kitchen feel colder than it was. The notebook still lay on the table where I had left it the night before, the pages already scarred with notes from the first 3 calls. Sarah. Sympathy wrapped in excuses. Dave. Deflections and empty promises. Mike. Lectures and refusal. Each name carved a deeper line into the truth I had been afraid to face. I ran my hand across the leather cover, almost hoping the words would smudge, that they might blur into something softer. But ink doesn't lie. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though it did little to steady me. My chest felt heavy with the weight of the conversations replaying in my head. For years, I had let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, if I ever needed them, they would come. Now, the illusion was breaking, and I wasn't sure I could gather the pieces back together. Still, I had started this test, and there were more names to call. The next one was Susan, my sister-in-law, Dave's wife. If there was one person who had perfected the art of judgment, it was her. At family gatherings, she never missed a chance to remind me that I lived in such a quaint house. Her smile thin, her words lined with sugar and spite. She had once told Susan within my earshot, "Jack's reliable. Maybe too reliable. People like that never really get ahead, do they?" I had let it pass then, but the memory stuck. Now it was her turn. I scrolled to her name, pressed the call button, and listened. She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped and businesslike. "Jack, to what do I owe the pleasure?" I forced a tired sigh. "Susan, I wouldn't call if it weren't serious. I've run into trouble." Oh, there was curiosity in her tone, but no warmth. "I made some bad investments," I continued. "The bank is circling. I need $5,000 to hold them off." There was a pause, and I could almost picture her lips tightening, her eyes narrowing. Then came the laugh, short, sharp, disbelieving. Jack, I always wondered when you'd slip up. You've been so high and mighty all these years, helping everyone, acting like you had it all figured out, and now you expect us to bail you out?" Her words cut, though I had expected nothing less. "I'm asking for help, Susan. Family helps family, or so I thought." She scoffed. "Family helps family when it makes sense. Dave and I have our commitments. Maybe you should sell that little house of yours. Downsize. Live within your means like the rest of us. I kept my tone even though my hands trembled. You mean like when I helped Dave after the restaurant failed? Or when I gave you both money after the storm? Silence. Then her voice grew sharp. That was different. That was for something we all benefited from. This is just your mess. I closed my eyes, letting her words settle. I see, I said finally. Thank you for your honesty. She hung up without another word. I stared at the phone in my hand, the dial tone humming in my ears. Slowly, I wrote her name in the notebook. Scorn, judgment, no help. The bitterness sat in my chest like a stone. For calls, for failures. I took a long swallow of bourbon, though the sun had barely risen. The taste burned, but not enough to dull the ache. By midday, I was pacing the living room, the notebook open on the coffee table. My eyes drifted to the last name I had written the night before, almost as an afterthought. Betty. Dear Betty, who had given me $200 when no one else would. She was the last person I expected to test. She had so little, but fairness demanded I call her, too. Still, I hesitated. If she failed me, I wasn't sure I could bear it. And if she helped, it would be at a cost she couldn't afford. My thumb hovered over her number for what felt like hours. Finally, I set the phone down and stepped outside. The crisp autumn air cut through my thoughts, grounding me. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, past children playing, past a couple arguing quietly on a porch. The world moved on, oblivious to the quiet war I was waging within myself. By the time I returned home, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The notebook still lay on the table, waiting. I couldn't avoid it forever. I picked up the phone, dialed, and waited. Her voice answered warm, familiar. Jack, it's been too long. How are you? I swallowed hard. Not so good, Betty. I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important. Her tone shifted instantly, concern lacing every word. What's wrong? I let the silence stretch before answering. I lost money. Investments went bad. The bank's coming for the house. I need $5,000 to keep it. There was no hesitation. None. Oh, Jack, she breathed. That's terrible. Of course, I'll help. I don't have 5, but I can get 3. It's nearly all my savings, but you need it more. Her words hit me harder than all the refusals combined. I gripped the phone tighter, my throat closing. Betty, I can't. No arguments, she interrupted gently. Family helps family, and you've always been there for me. It's my turn. Tears stung my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I turned my face away, though no one could see me. Thank you, I whispered, my voice breaking. Don't you thank me, she replied firmly. Just promise me you'll be okay. Promise me this won't break you. I promise, I said, though my heart knew it was already broken. We spoke a while longer about small things. Her health, her garden, the books she was reading. When we hung up, the silence in the house felt different. Not heavy, but alive, echoing with her kindness. I opened the notebook, wrote her name, and for the first time that week, I didn't write failure. Instead, I wrote, gave almost all she had. No hesitation. True. I sat back, staring at the words until they blurred. The candle flickered beside me, casting long shadows across the room. For days, I had been peeling back the layers of my family, exposing rot where I had hoped for strength. And now, here was the one person with the least to give, offering me more than anyone else. It wasn't the money that moved me. It was the instinct, the immediacy of her love. No calculations, no excuses, just giving because that's what you do when you love someone. It was both a balm and a wound. A balm because it proved love could exist. A wound because it showed how deeply the others had failed. I closed the notebook, placed my hand on its cover, and sat in the dim light. Tomorrow there will be more calls, more truths to uncover. But tonight, I let myself sit with the only truth that mattered. That sometimes the richest soul is the one with the least in their pockets. The clock ticked on, the bourbon glass empty, the candle burning low. Outside, the world settled into sleep. Inside, I whispered into the silence, "I see you, Betty, and I won't forget." The morning after my call with Betty, I woke with swollen eyes. I hadn't cried in years, not even at Susan's funeral, at least not where anyone could see. But last night had broken through something in me. The way Betty had offered what little she had without hesitation, without judgment. It had both comforted and wounded me in ways I couldn't fully name. I had written her words in the notebook, "True," and stared at them until the ink blurred. It was the only entry that didn't burn. I sat at the table now, the notebook closed but heavy in front of me. For refusals, one act of kindness that cut me deeper than all the cruelty combined. I should have felt like I'd won. Instead, I felt hollow, as though each conversation had taken another piece of me. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Not with the test itself, but with my ability to endure it. The phone rang in the middle of the morning. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered, the familiar voice steadied me. "Jack, it's Frank. I was thinking about what you told me. Are you free today?" I hesitated, staring at the bourbon glass still on the table from last night. "I'm free." "Good," he said. "Meet me at the hall in an hour. Bring that notebook." The drive was short, but my hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they should have. When I stepped into the community hall, Frank was already waiting at a table in the corner, 2 mugs of coffee steaming between us. He looked me over, his sharp eyes taking in the lines etched deeper into my face. "You've been calling," he said, not as a question. I sat across from him and placed the notebook on the table. He tapped it with one finger, then slid it closer. "Let's hear it." So I told him. Every call, every excuse, every silence that hurt more than the words themselves. And finally, Betty's voice, offering what little she had. Frank leaned back, shaking his head slowly. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. People show their true selves when giving costs them something. That's why most don't bother. "I feel like I'm tearing myself apart," I admitted. "Every time I dial, I hope to be wrong. And every time I'm not." Frank studied me. "So stop hoping. That's what's killing you. Not the truth, the hope." I looked at him, the words hitting harder than I expected. He wasn't cruel, just direct. That was always his way. "I need something," I said quietly. "Something that keeps me grounded. Proof. Because I know what'll happen. Later, when the guilt creeps back in. When they look me in the eye with their sweet words and promises, I'll start to wonder if I imagined it all. I'll start to question myself." Frank nodded. "Then record them. Write it down. Date it. Keep everything. Not for a courtroom, for your own sanity. You've been lied to your whole life. Don't let them do it again." I stared at him, the weight of his words anchoring me. "You think that'll help?" "I know it will," he said firmly. "Because it's one thing to remember the sting. It's another to hear their voices later, exactly as they were. That's the truth you can't argue with." He handed me a small device I hadn't noticed he'd brought with him. "Digital recorder. Use it for the next calls. Don't tell them. Just let it run. And every time you finish, save a copy. Back it up. You'll thank me." I turned it over in my hand. It was simple, small enough to fit in my pocket, but it felt heavier than gold. "Frank," I began, but he cut me off. "You don't have to thank me. I've seen this too many times. Families who bleed a man dry then call him selfish when he finally says no. You're not the first. You won't be the last." We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee that had already gone lukewarm. Finally, he said, "There's one more thing. You've got to stop apologizing. You've spent your whole life cushioning their feelings. Don't soften it anymore. Ask directly. See how fast the mask slips?" The words lodged deep in me. I realized then that every call so far, I had softened the blow, tried to give them an easy out. Maybe part of me still wanted to protect them from themselves. Maybe part of me still wanted to protect myself from the sting. But Frank was right. If I was going to see the truth, I had to stop padding it with hope. That evening, I sat back at the kitchen table, the recorder beside my phone, the candle flickering low. I pressed the button, watched the red light blink, and dialed the next number. My cousin Harold. He wasn't on the original list, but after the past few days I wanted to widen the circle. He had borrowed from me once years ago to cover gambling debts. Promised to pay me back. Never did. The phone rang, then his voice cheerful. "Jack, long time. What's up?" I let the weariness drip from my voice. "I'm in trouble, Harold. Investments went bad. The bank is threatening foreclosure. I need $5,000 to keep the house." His laugh was too loud. Forced. "Oh man, that's rough. 5, huh? That's a chunk. I'd love to help, really, but you know how it is. Things are tight. Tell you what, I'll put you on my prayer list." The hypocrisy made my teeth ache. "A prayer list?" I repeated flatly. Yeah, he said quickly. "That always helps me." "Not as much as cash would," I replied. Silence. Then the sound of him clearing his throat. "Well, good luck, cousin. I'm sure you'll figure it out." He hung up before I could say another word. I looked at the recorder, its red light still blinking, capturing every syllable. Proof. I picked up the notebook and wrote. Harold. Hollow laughter. Prayers. No help. Later, as I poured another bourbon, Frank's words came back. "Stop apologizing. Stop softening." So when I called the next person, my niece Kelly, I didn't bother with a big speech. "Kelly," I said, my voice steady, "I need $5,000 to keep the bank from taking the house." There was a stunned pause, then a flurry of excuses about student loans, rent, and a car payment. I didn't argue. I didn't soothe. I just let the silence sit until she faltered, then said quietly, "Thank you for being honest." And I hung up. Felt cleaner that way. No more giving them room to decorate their refusals with pity. No more cushioning the truth. Just the bare bones of it. By the time the candle burned low that night, I had filled more pages in the notebook. Each name a reminder, each word an anchor. But instead of feeling crushed, I felt a strange kind of strength building. Maybe it was the recorder in my pocket or Frank's voice still echoing in my head. Maybe it was simply the clarity that comes when the fog of hope finally begins to lift. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Betty, her voice steady, offering what she couldn't afford to lose. That image burned brighter than all the refusals, and it reminded me that love did exist, even if only in one corner of this fractured family. I blew out the candle, the smoke curling into the air, and whispered into the dark, "One day they'll see. Not through my words, but through their own." The red light of the recorder blinked off, and the room fell silent again. There's a peculiar kind of silence that follows you when you've stripped yourself of illusions. It's not peace, not yet. More like standing in the hollow of a church after the people have left. The air still heavy with echoes, but nothing alive to fill it. That's how the house felt after those recordings. Every wall seemed to whisper, "They showed you who they are. Don't pretend you didn't hear." For days I played the tapes back. Harold's hollow laughter, Kelly's flustered excuses, even the way Betty's voice cracked when she promised help she didn't have. The recorder had become my mirror. I didn't recognize myself in the man who used to smooth over everyone's guilt, who used to nod and smile and forgive. I was harder now, quieter but sharper. And with that sharpness came a thought. Testing them with requests was one thing, but what if I tested them with collapse? What if I let them believe I was sinking fast? No longer just in need of help, but on the brink of losing everything. My home, my dignity, maybe even my life itself. Would they lean in to hold me up, or would they step back, relieved to watch me fall? The thought festered until it became a plan. Started with my son, Mike. He hadn't called since my bad investment story, and I knew his silence wasn't worry. It was calculation. If I were broke, what use was I? But I decided to bring him closer, just enough to see what he'd do when the ground seemed to give way beneath me. I dialed his number late one evening, the recorder running, my hands steady this time. He answered with clipped words as though I'd interrupted something more important. "Dad." "Mike." I said softly. I let my voice tremble just enough. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The bank called again. They said foreclosure papers might come next week. He didn't respond right away. I imagined him glancing at his wife, Sophie, whispering behind a cupped hand. Finally, he said, That's rough. What are you going to do? I let the silence hang heavy, then exhaled like a man defeated. I don't know. Maybe I'll just let them take it. Maybe it's easier that way. He shifted in tone then, almost too quickly. Well, if you lose the house, you can always move into assisted living. Sophie's mom found a good place for her aunt last year. They have payment plans. My grip tightened on the receiver. Assisted living. To him, I was already halfway gone. A burden to be shuffled into some corner. I see, I murmured. It might be best, he continued, his voice a little brighter now, as though he'd solved something. You'd be around people your age, structured meals, medical staff on site. Safer. I imagined Sophie standing there, nodding, maybe even smiling. My son, ready to pack me away like old furniture the moment it became convenient. Thank you, Mike, I said quietly, the recorder blinking its red eye. You've given me a lot to think about. I hung up before he could reply. I didn't pour a bourbon that night. I wanted the sting to stay sharp. I wanted to remember every word without blurring it. The next day, I tried my daughter Sarah. She picked up on the third ring. Her voice rushed as though the world was always demanding more of her. Dad, what's wrong? It's late. I forced a ragged sigh. I don't think I can cover the mortgage this month. I might be out on the street. Her pause wasn't concern. It was hesitation. The sound of someone weighing risk against reward. Finally, she said, If that happens, Dad, you can always sell the house and move in with someone. Maybe Uncle Dave has space. Or, those retirement villages aren't so bad. Would you take me in? I asked quietly, letting the question fall like a stone in still water. Silence stretched so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then her voice came, thin, rehearsed. Dad, it's complicated. The kids. The space. You'd be uncomfortable. Of course, I said, swallowing the acid rising in my throat. I wouldn't want to burden you. That's not what I meant, she rushed. But I cut her off. Thank you, Sarah. I'll figure it out. I ended the call, the red light blinking like a heartbeat on the table. That night, I wrote in the notebook, Mike offered assisted living. Eager relief in his tone. Sarah couldn't even say the word yes. Her silence spoke louder than any refusal. I stared at the words until my hand cramped. Each entry was a tombstone, marking the burial of another illusion. But here's the twist I hadn't planned for. After those calls, I didn't feel weaker. I felt stronger, because every time they revealed themselves, the mask I'd built for them cracked further. And the clearer I saw them, the less power they had over me. Frank called the next day. He didn't even wait for me to speak. They failed you again, didn't they? Yes, I admitted. Good, he barked. Yes, he said firmly. Because the more they fail, the more you're freed from the lie. You think you're losing family, but what you're losing is the leash they've had on your neck for decades. I sat with his words, letting them burn. He was right. Each refusal wasn't just betrayal. It was release. I decided to push the experiment further. If they thought I was truly crumbling, would anyone try to take advantage? The answer came quicker than I expected. A week later, my brother Dave showed up at my door unannounced. He hadn't visited in months, not since the investment losses rumor I'd fed him. Jack, he said too brightly, heard things are rough. I let him in, the recorder tucked into my pocket. He scanned the room like a vulture, his eyes lingering on the bourbon bottle, the unpaid bills I'd left deliberately scattered on the counter. He began, settling into a chair. I could take this place off your hands before the bank does, get you some cash to tide you over. Not much, of course, given the circumstances, but better than nothing, right? I stared at him, my jaw tight. He wanted to buy me out for pennies. swoop in on what he thought was a carcass. Dave, I said slowly, what would you do with the house? Oh, he waved a hand. Flip it. Maybe rent it. Sophie's nephew needs a place. Could be perfect. Everyone wins. Everyone but me. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch until he shifted uncomfortably. I'll think about it, I said finally. As he left, I caught his reflection in the window, a satisfied smirk, the kind a man wears when he believes he's just outplayed his brother. When the door clicked shut, I whispered to the recorder in my pocket, Dave, vulture, ready to gut me alive. That night, the candle burned lower than usual, the shadows longer. I thought about Mike's eagerness to tuck me away, Sarah's cowardly silence, and Dave's greed. And instead of despair, I felt something else rise in me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, steadier. Resolve. Because now I understand. This wasn't just a test anymore. It was preparation. They thought they were circling a broken man. They had no idea I was taking notes, saving every word, every smirk, every silence. One day soon, I'd place it all before them like a mirror they couldn't turn away from. And when that day came, they'd finally see what I saw. Not family, not love, but a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. I blew out the candle, the smoke curling in the air, and said aloud to the empty room, You've written your verdict. I'm just the witness. The recorder's red light blinked off, sealing the night's confession in its memory. The morning after Dave's visit, I woke to a different kind of silence. Not the hollow kind, but purposeful. A silence that felt like the pause before a craftsman takes his first strike with the chisel. Something inside me had settled. No more waiting for them to prove me wrong. They already had. Now it was my turn to prepare. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and a black pen. The words from the night before stared back at me. Mike, assisted living. Sarah, silence. Dave, vulture. Below that, I wrote a new word in heavy strokes. Plan. For the first time in weeks, my hands didn't tremble. I knew revenge wasn't the right word for what I wanted. Revenge is hot, reckless. This needed to be something colder, cleaner. Justice. A mirror so clear they couldn't look away. And the beauty of it? They would set it all in motion themselves. The first step was legal. I called Frank the next afternoon. He answered with the same gravelly steadiness he always had. Frank, I need a lawyer, I said simply. He chuckled. You already got one. No, not for me. For them. He was silent for a beat, then said, Explain. I lowered my voice. If they think I'm broke, they'll circle closer. Dave already tried to buy the house for scraps. I need everything recorded, documented, and airtight. And when the time comes, I want it in black and white. Every lie, every betrayal, every scheme. Not my word against theirs. Paper. Signatures. Recordings. Frank whistled low. You're building a case. I'm building a mirror, I corrected. He didn't argue. Instead, he gave me the name of a colleague, a quiet man, discreet, who handled estates and family disputes. I called that evening and made an appointment under the guise of restructuring my will. The lawyer never needed to know the full truth. All he had to do was help me set the stage. The next week, I drove downtown wearing my oldest jacket and carrying a folder stuffed with unpaid bills. All props, of course. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and lemon polish. He shook my hand with polite detachment, the way professionals do when they expect nothing but routine. I want to make some changes, I told him, sliding the folder across the desk. Circumstances have shifted. We talked for over an hour. I asked about how wills worked, how estates were divided, and what rights children or siblings could claim. He explained patiently, never suspecting that each detail was another brick in the wall I was building. By the time I left, I knew exactly how to structure things so that when the truth surfaced, they couldn't twist it. That night, I wrote in my notebook, mirror framed, glass still hidden. But legal papers were only one piece. The next step was financial. Money, after all, was the stage on which they revealed themselves, and I still had $60 million waiting quietly in accounts they didn't know existed. I made an appointment at the bank, this time in a suit I hadn't worn in years. The young manager greeted me with professional warmth, but I saw the flicker in his eyes when I slid the documents across his desk. Accounts opened under trust names not linked to mine directly. Ironclad privacy clauses. Are you sure you want this level of separation from your family, Mr. Peterson? He asked. Positive, I said without hesitation. If anything happens to me, I want the money protected, untouchable. He nodded, clicking his pen. Then you'll need trustees. Who do you trust? I smiled faintly. Not family. By the time I left, every cent was locked away in vehicles they couldn't sniff out, let alone touch. On the surface, I was broke, drowning. In reality, I was more secure than I'd ever been. The test of my preparations came sooner than I expected. Sarah showed up one Sunday afternoon unannounced. She stood at my doorstep clutching a casserole dish like it was a peace offering. Dad, she said, forcing a smile. I thought you might want company. I let her in, watching carefully. Her eyes darted to the stack of fake bills I'd left in plain sight. She sat at the table, hands fidgeting with the dish towel. Sarah, I said softly, it's good to see you. She nodded, then blurted, Dad, have you thought about selling the house? It's too much for you alone. And if the bank's breathing down your neck? Her voice trailed off. I tilted my head. And if I sold, where would I go? She hesitated, then offered a brittle laugh. Well, Mike mentioned an assisted living place, or you could come stay with me, I suppose. Just for a little while. It sounded generous on the surface, but I heard the catch. Just for a little while. Long enough to ease her conscience. Not long enough to inconvenience her. I smiled gently. That's kind of you, Sarah. I'll think about it. She left soon after, casserole untouched. The moment the door closed, I whispered into the recorder. Sarah. Appearance of help. Reality. Containment. A few days later, Mike called again. His tone was brisk, businesslike. Dad, Sophie, and I talked. We think it's best if you downsize now before things get ugly. If you sign the house over to us, we'll take care of the payments. That way you won't have to worry. I gripped the receiver tighter. Sign the house over to you? Yes, it's practical. You can stay here for a bit, but eventually we'll move in. It's a win-win. For him, maybe. For me, it was exile from my own life. I let my voice quiver. I'll need time to think. Don't take too long, he pressed. The bank won't wait. I hung up, my chest tight, but instead of despair, I felt that cold resolve deepen. Every word, every offer, they were digging their own graves, and I was just holding the shovel steady. That night, Frank came over. We sat on the porch, the autumn air sharp with the smell of burning leaves. They're closing in, I said quietly. Good, Frank replied. The closer they come, the more they reveal. Just don't rush. Let them think they're winning. I nodded. The hardest part is not showing my hand. Frank sipped his coffee, then looked at me with a glint in his eye. When the time comes, Jack, you won't just show them your hand. You'll show them the whole deck. And then came the twist I hadn't expected. One evening, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, the phone rang. It was Dave again, his voice syrupy. Jack, brother. I've been thinking. Why let the bank take everything? I could help. I'll buy the place tomorrow, cash. No paperwork delays, no foreclosure shame. Just clean and easy. I knew exactly what he was doing, trying to swoop before anyone else could. But instead of anger, I felt a curious calm. Dave, I said slowly, come by tomorrow. We'll talk. After I hung up, I stared at the recorder on the counter. Tomorrow, the mask will slip even further, and I will be ready. Because the foundation was set. Legal documents hidden, money secure, evidence piling higher every day. They thought they were circling a dying man. In truth, I was circling them. I closed the notebook, blew out the lamp, and whispered to the darkness. You wanted leverage. Now you'll have it, just not the way you think. Morning light fell across the kitchen table, catching the rim of my coffee mug. I had slept little the night before, my mind pacing even if my body lay still. Dave was coming today, the man who had shared my blood, my childhood, and more than once my trust, only to drain it dry. I knew he'd arrive wearing his best smile, carrying promises that smelled like rot. I pulled my notebook closer and wrote a single line. Today he shows his hand. By noon, the knock came, sharp, impatient. I opened the door to find Dave standing there in his leather jacket, one hand already reaching into his pocket as though ready to deal. "Jack," he said warmly, too warmly. "You're looking good." I let my eyes linger on him. "Come in." He stepped inside, glancing at the bills stacked on the counter, the faint smell of coffee and old wood wrapping around us. He didn't sit until I gestured, then began. "Let's not waste time. I know you're in a bind. I'm here to help." "Help?" I echoed. "Yes, cash offer. House for me, freedom for you. No bank breathing down your neck. You can pocket something, move somewhere smaller, live easily." He slid a folded envelope closer. "I'm doing this for you, Jack." I didn't touch it. "For me?" I repeated softly. "Of course." His smile strained. "We're brothers." Silence stretched. Then I asked, "What's in the envelope?" "Offer letter," he said quickly. "Signed. All legal. You'll see I'm being generous." I opened it slowly, my eyes scanning the numbers. It was a joke. A fraction of the house's worth, even in its worn state. A vulture's bargain. I laid the paper flat, smoothing it with my palm. "Dave, you're offering less than half its value." He leaned forward. "Half of something is better than nothing. You and I both know the bank will snatch it for even less." I met his gaze steady. "And if I refuse?" He shrugged, trying for a casual look. "Then you drown. I'm offering you a lifeline." My lips curved into the faintest smile. "A lifeline?" I murmured. In that moment, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted. What Dave didn't know was that the small device under the table was recording every word. His lifeline would be another piece of the puzzle, another shard of proof showing who he truly was when the mask slipped. But I wasn't finished. "Dave," I said quietly, "would you give me a day to think? To speak with Mike and Sarah?" His expression flickered, then tightened. "Jack, don't drag your kids into this. They'll just complicate things." I tilted my head. "And why would that bother you?" He forced a laugh. "It doesn't. I just don't want you stressed." I nodded slowly. "One day. Tomorrow we'll talk again." He rose reluctantly, clapped my shoulder like we were still boys, and left. I stood at the door long after he disappeared, the faint echo of his shoes fading down the street. When I turned back to the table, the envelope still lay there, thin and pathetic. I whispered into the recorder, "Dave, cash offer, predatory, mask slipping." That evening I made 2 phone calls. First to Mike. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight. "Dad, your uncle came by," I said simply. "Dave? What did he want?" "He offered to buy the house. Cash." Pause, then sharply. "Don't sign anything, Dad. He'll rob you blind. Better to put it under my name. That way it stays in the family." "In the family," I echoed. "And where would I live?" "We'd figure it out. You could stay here a while or at Sarah's." "Look, Dad, the house is too much for you. Let me take it on. Dave can't be trusted." "Neither can you," I almost said, but bit it back. Instead, I murmured, "I'll think on it." "Don't wait too long," he warned. "Dave moves fast." After we hung up, I scribbled in the notebook, "Mike, protective language, self-interest beneath." Next I called Sarah. She answered, breathless, children chattering in the background. "Dad, everything okay? Your uncle came by." "Oh God, what did he want this time?" "He offered to buy the house." Silence, then cautiously, "Did you consider it?" I told him I'd think. "Sarah, if I sold, where would I go?" She hesitated, then sighed. "You know, you could stay with us. Just for a little, but Dad, maybe selling isn't the worst idea. At least then you wouldn't have the bank hounding you. I closed my eyes. And you'd be comfortable with Dave owning the house? Her voice dropped. Better him than losing everything. Better him. Better a vulture than facing her guilt. I thanked her softly and ended the call. In the notebook, Sarah. Passive. Will surrender for peace of mind. Later that night, Frank came by again. We sat in the dim light of the porch, the hum of crickets loud in the still air. I handed him the envelope. He read it, snorted. He's gutting you. I know you're not considering this. I shook my head. No, but I want them to believe I am. Tomorrow Dave will return. I'll let him think he's won. Frank's eyes narrowed. You're baiting him. Exactly. Every word, every gesture I want on record. When the time comes, they won't just be greedy. They'll be complicit. Frank leaned back, exhaling smoke into the night. You're colder than I thought, Jack. I met his gaze. Colder is the only way to survive this. The next day, Dave arrived early. He smelled of aftershave and ambition. Well, he said, dropping into the chair. I slid the envelope back across the table. I'm leaning, yes, but I need one assurance. He perked up. Anything? If I sell, I want to stay here for a few months until I find a place. He waved a hand. Of course, you'll have time. His eagerness betrayed him. I nodded, feigning relief. Then let's do it. But Dave, yes, keep this between us. No need to upset the kids until it's final. He grinned. Smart man. The recorder caught every word. That night, I replayed the tape, listening to Dave's voice dripping with false concern. Then Mike's sharpness, Sarah's passivity. The picture was nearly complete. But as I sat there in the quiet, a strange thought struck me. Maybe the house wasn't the prize at all. Maybe it was the stage. The place where all their choices would be revealed publicly, undeniably. I wrote one final note that night. House equals stage. Truth equals curtain. And with that, the outline of the end began to take shape. The morning the plans settled into place, I woke before dawn. The house was still quiet as a church. I sat at the kitchen table with the blinds half closed, watching the first streaks of light crawl across the floorboards. In front of me lay the contract Dave had brought, his laughable numbers glaring up like an insult. Next to it, my old recorder sat waiting, a silent witness that had captured every promise, every betrayal. I brewed a pot of coffee, poured a mug, and stared at the steam rising. My hands didn't shake anymore. The fear had burned itself out. What remained was something colder, heavier, resolve. That afternoon, I dialed Mike first. He answered briskly, almost expectantly. Dad, you made a decision? I have, I said evenly. I've spoken with Dave. I'm leaning toward selling, but I want you and Sarah here when I finalize it. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, in the living room. There was a pause. Then his voice sharpened. Dad, don't let him talk you into this. You should sign the house over to me instead. At least then. I'm not debating it over the phone. I cut in. Tomorrow, 8. He exhaled hard. Fine, but you'll regret it. I wrote the words in my notebook. You'll regret it. Next, I called Sarah. She sounded distracted, kids clamoring in the background. Dad, what's wrong? I've decided, I said simply. Meeting tomorrow, 8 o'clock. You, Mike, and your uncle. I want everything settled. Her silence stretched. Then she whispered, if that's what you think is best. Best. I let the word hang in my mind like a question with no answer. Finally, I phoned Dave. He was all charm. Jack, I knew you'd see reason. Tomorrow, then? Perfect. I'll bring the papers. Good, I said. 8 o'clock. When I hung up, the house felt different. Charged, as though the walls themselves were bracing for what was to come. The next day passed slowly. I cleaned the house with deliberate care, polishing the table, vacuuming the worn rug, and setting out chairs in the living room. Every detail mattered. This wasn't a family gathering. It was a stage, and tomorrow the curtain would rise. As I worked, I remembered Sunday dinners from decades ago. My wife is setting the table. The kids are giggling, and Dave is cracking jokes too loudly. Back then, this house felt like the center of gravity. Now it was nothing but a trap they couldn't see yet. In the evening, Frank came by carrying his thermos of black coffee. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. "You're dressing it up," he said. "It needs to look ordinary," I replied. "The more ordinary it feels, the less they'll see it coming." He sat, sipping slowly. "You sure you're ready for this?" I met his gaze. "I've been ready since the day that ticket hit my hand." He nodded, then leaned forward. "So walk me through it." I laid it out. Tomorrow night, they'd all gather. Dave would bring the contract. Mike would press his claim. Sarah would try to make peace. And I would sit, listening, recording, letting them show themselves. At the end, when every mask had dropped, I would pull back the curtain. Frank gave a low whistle. Cold. Surgical. "It has to be," I said. "This isn't revenge. It's truth." But deep down, I knew it was both. The next evening, the sun dipped low, staining the windows gold. I set the recorder beneath the table, hidden but ready. The contract lay beside me, untouched. At 8 o'clock sharp, the knock came. Dave entered first, swaggering in every step, papers tucked under his arm. "Evening, Jack," he said, clapping me on the back. "Let's make this quick." Moments later, Mike arrived, his jaw tight, eyes flicking instantly to the envelope in Dave's hand. "So it's true," he snapped. "You're considering this?" Sarah came last, quiet. Her children left at home. She slipped inside like someone walking into church before a funeral. We sat in the living room, the air thick. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. "Tonight," I said, "we settle this once and for all." Dave leaned forward, dropping the papers on the coffee table. "Here it is. Cash deal. No bank, no waiting. You sign, Jack, and you walk free." Mike barked a laugh. "Free? He's robbing you. Dad, don't be a fool. Sign the deed over to me. Keep it in the family. I'll make sure you're taken care of." "Taken care of?" Dave scoffed. "You'll bleed him worse than I ever would. Better me than you." Mike shot back. Sarah raised her hands, her voice trembling. "Stop it, both of you. This isn't about us. It's about Dad being safe." Their voices rose, clashing like knives in a drawer. I sat still, my hands folded, letting it unfold. Finally, Dave slammed the table. "Jack, choose right now." I looked at him, then at Mike, then at Sarah. Their faces told the story better than any words. Greed, desperation, fear, family stripped bare. I let the silence stretch until even the air seemed to lean in. Then softly I said, "Do you know what this house is?" They blinked. "It's not wood and nails. It's not square footage or equity. It's a mirror. And tonight, you've all shown me exactly who you are." Dave frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" I reached beneath the table and clicked off the recorder, sliding it into view. The red light blinked once before dying. Mike stiffened. Sarah's eyes widened. Dave paled. "Every word," I said coldly. "Every threat, every bargain, every plea. Recorded." The room froze. "You came here tonight thinking I was cornered," I continued. "But you were the ones on stage. And the truth you've shown, that's worth more than any house." Dave surged to his feet. "You can't." "I already did." My voice cut through him. "And tomorrow the bank will hear it. The lawyer will hear it. And if I need to, the world will hear it. So sit down." He did, slowly. I looked at Mike, his face red with anger, and at Sarah, her eyes brimming with tears. "This was never about saving me," I said. "It was about what you wanted. And now I know." Silence filled the room, heavier than any argument. Finally, I stood, gathering the contract, folding it once and sliding it back toward Dave. "Take this with you," I said. "It's worthless now." He didn't move. Mike muttered, "Dad, you don't have to." "I do," I interrupted, "because tonight proves something. Money doesn't change people, it shows them. I walked to the door, opened it wide. Now leave. For a moment, no one moved. Then one by one they did. Dave stormed out first, his swagger gone. Mike followed, jaw clenched, muttering under his breath. Sarah lingered a moment, whispering, "I'm sorry, Dad," before slipping into the night. When the door closed, I stood in the quiet house. The stage finally cleared. The curtain had fallen. But deep inside, I knew the play wasn't over yet. There was still one act left. The revelation I had saved, hidden from all of them. The truth about the ticket. And when that curtain rose, none of them would ever forget. The night after I sent them all out of my house, I didn't sleep. The silence was thick, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I poured myself a glass of water, sat in the armchair, and stared into the dark. I replayed the scene again and again. Their raised voices, the greed that oozed from every word, the shock in their eyes when the recorder blinked. For years, I had told myself family was everything. Last night, I'd learned the truth. Family, when stripped of pretense, could be the hungriest wolves of all. But there was still one truth I hadn't laid bare. One they never saw coming. The ticket. I hadn't told anyone, not even Frank. The fortune sat in an account, silent, untouched. They thought the house was the prize, but the house was just the bait. I leaned back in my chair, the corners of my mouth tightening into something that wasn't quite a smile. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I end it. Morning came slowly, gray clouds stretching across the sky. I dressed carefully, not in my usual worn flannel, but in a pressed shirt, jacket, and shoes polished until I could almost see my reflection. I looked in the mirror and hardly recognized the man staring back. For once, I didn't see the weary father or the brother being pushed around. I saw someone who still had the power to choose. At noon, Frank knocked on the door. "You look like you're going to court," he said, eyes narrowing. "In a way I am," I replied. "Only the verdict's already written." He followed me to the car, silent. I drove to the bank, the envelope tucked in my inside pocket. Not the contract Dave had waved around, not the fake deeds Mike had begged for. This envelope was plain, sealed, carrying the only thing that mattered: a copy of my claim, proof of the lottery account, proof that $58 million were already secured. My lawyer had drawn it up quietly weeks ago at my request. By the time I returned home, a storm was rolling in. The air was heavy, charged. I picked up the phone and dialed. "Sarah," I said, "bring Mike. Bring Dave if you must. Tonight, one last time. After this, there will be no more meetings." She hesitated. "Dad, are you sure?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Tonight, 8 o'clock. The rain had started by the time they arrived. Wipers squealed outside, headlights sweeping across the driveway. They came in dripping, unsettled, their eyes flicking to the empty table. No contract this time. No staged performance. Just me, the old armchair, and the envelope resting on the mantel. Mike was the first to speak. "Dad, what is this?" "Another trick." Dave scowled. "I don't have time for games." Sarah hovered by the door, her face pale. I gestured for them to sit. "This won't take long." For a moment, no one moved. Then, reluctantly, they settled. The storm rattled the windows, thunder rolling in the distance. "You came here last time," I began slowly, thinking the house was everything, thinking I was cornered, desperate. "You bared your teeth and I saw you. But the house was never the prize." Their brows knit. "What are you talking about?" Mike asked, irritation rising. I rose, walked to the mantel, and took the envelope in my hand. The paper was stiff, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. 3 weeks ago," I said, "I won $58 million in the lottery." The words landed like stones in the silence. Mike blinked, confusion twisting into disbelief. "What?" Dave laughed, sharp and bitter. "You expect us to believe that?" Sarah gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes wide. I held up the envelope. "Inside this are the documents, proof signed and sealed. I haven't touched a cent." Not yet. For the first time, the room shifted. Their eyes weren't on me anymore. They were on the envelope, like wolves catching the scent of blood. Mike leaned forward, his voice urgent. Dad, if that's true, then we can fix everything. You don't need to struggle. I can help manage it. You need someone you can trust. Dave scoffed. Trust? He'd blow it in a year. I've been handling deals my whole life, Jack. Let me invest it for you. Double it in 5 years. Sarah shook her head fiercely. No, stop. Don't you see? This isn't about us. Dad, you should use it for yourself. For once, live for you. I let them speak, each word piling higher. Greed and desperation mixing with denial. It was the same play, only the stage had changed. Last time it was the house. Tonight it was a fortune. And again they revealed themselves. I placed the envelope back on the mantel and turned to face them. I wanted to see, I said quietly. If you believed I was broke, who would stand by me? Who would care? And I saw the answer. Now I wanted to see the other side. If you knew I had everything, who would you become? Their faces told me more than words ever could. Mike's mouth worked soundlessly, panic flaring in his eyes. Dave looked ready to lunge across the room. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You failed both tests, I said, my voice steady as stone. When you thought I had nothing, you abandoned me. When you thought I had everything, you tried to claim it. Not one of you saw me. Not one of you cared what I wanted. Only what I could give. Mike rose, his fists clenching. That's not fair. I'm your son. You were my son long before money entered the picture. I cut in. And long before tonight, you showed me exactly what I meant to you. Dave sneered. So what now, Jack? You gonna cut us out? Leave us with nothing? I stared at him, then at Mike, then at Sarah. My hands didn't tremble. My voice didn't waver. Yes, I said simply. Nothing. Sarah burst into sobs, crumpling into the couch. Mike cursed under his breath, pacing like a caged animal. Dave's face twisted, but he said nothing. I walked to the door and opened it wide, rain lashing the porch. Get out, I said. No one moved. I said get out. This time they rose. Dave stormed out first, muttering threats. Mike followed, his face pale, his eyes burning with something I didn't recognize. Sarah lingered, her tears cutting paths down her cheeks. Dad, please. Don't shut me out. I met her eyes. She was the only one who had shown even a flicker of remorse. You made your choice, Sarah. Tonight I made mine. Her shoulders shook as she turned and left. When the door closed, I stood alone in the silence, the storm still raging outside. The envelope lay untouched on the mantel. I picked it up, slid it into the drawer, and locked it away. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter. In the weeks that followed, the phone calls came. Angry voicemails from Mike, pleading messages from Sarah, silence from Dave. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth had already been spoken, recorded, etched into memory. I met with my lawyer, set up trusts, foundations, plans they'd never see. Not $1 would pass into their hands. Instead, scholarships would bear my wife's name, a wing in the local hospital, a shelter downtown. Quiet legacies they'd never be able to twist into leverage. One afternoon, Frank sat with me on the porch, sipping his black coffee. You finally look at peace, he said. I nodded. Because I am. I know who they are and I know who I am. He studied me, then asked, so what now? I looked out at the horizon, the sun breaking through the last of the storm clouds. Now, I said softly, I live. And that was how it ended. Not with shouting, not with violence, but with clarity. They thought money was leverage. They thought they could bend me, break me, use me. But the truth is, leverage only works if you allow yourself to be lifted or pressed down. I had finally stepped away from their game. The 58 million sat untouched still, but its true value had already been spent. In revealing the faces behind the masks, in cutting the strings that bound me. I was Jack Peterson, 57 years old. And for the first time in a long, long while I was free.